welcome to Defn. This is episode number 64. Still, I'm in Holland, where the pandemic seems to be the second wave, and we are not allowed into Belgium and Germany. So I guess that's okay. I guess, man. Nobody goes to Belgium anyway. Who the fuck goes to Belgium? It's Belgium.
You're not allowed to come to Belgium, especially you. You know.
It's like the Hitchhiker Guide, like the worst word in the universe, in the galaxy. It's like Belgium,
Well,
Belgium.
I think we're all getting fucked by Corona. So yes, in Belgium, it's because of these bloody idiots who want to send their kids back to school, and I'm one of them, unfortunately, because we have got a teenage son, and he's back in school. They've already had a case at school. God knows if they're going to change their mind. It seems like a weird concept, to have all this like social distancing, small bubbles, and then say, oh, you know what? All these people that are like known to be super gregarious and lack any discipline, let's just get them all together.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what about the UK, Mr. James?
Welcome to Defn.
Thank you very much. Yes, UK. They're starting to talk about second waves again here. It's just about starting to make the news again. In terms of people talking about it and talking about potential lockdowns and that kind of thing. But I think we're in a similar situation. Like the schools went back. It must be a couple of weeks ago now.
Yeah.
They've just finished the Eat Out to Help Out. So we've all been sort of dining out for half price on the government, which is rather nice. Thank you, Chancellor, for that one.
Okay.
Is he called Sonny?
Rishi Sunak.
Oh, Rishi Sunak, yeah.
And then everyone back in the offices, well, apart from us, obviously, us techies.
Okay.
And they're starting to wonder why cases are going up again.
Yeah. Anyway, on that happy note, let's start. Yes.
Yeah. Agenda item number 1, the running order. See,
exactly. Yeah.
Check everyone's. Well, funnily enough, we can just do this little quick check. The COVID related kind of stories. One of my colleagues at work, we all work remote, so it's not like a breathing colleague. Well, he is breathing, but he's not over me.
Not breathing in your face.
I've seen him I've seen him breathing on the Zoom or whatever it is that we use. But he did get, exactly. he did get COVID, and he's a young lad, very fit. I mean, not young lad. He's about 35, but he's not like a teenager. But he's a young man. Was kind of like MMA guy, mixed martial arts, and super fit bloke. And he had it, and he's like, what? And it's like 2 or 3 months on now, and he's still kind of like feeling it, in his chest when he starts to do stuff. So it's pretty bad. Do you guys have any experience of colleagues or family members that have got it?
Fortunately, not for me. We got next door neighbour had it, I think, quite early on, and he said it was really quite rough. Apart from that,
I think
next door neighbours count. I mean, it's right next to you. It's like,
we're out in the country.
Family lives like half a mile, 300 miles away. But the next door neighbour, he's had it, but we're still kissing. We're still coming around for dinner every Friday.
And one of my colleagues, he got a COVID test, and he said it's horrible. And the test itself is like really, really bad because they put the swab up your nose, almost touching your brain.
Yeah.
So that's not a good experience. But luckily, it came out negative for him. But there are folks in New York, in one of the branches of the company that I work for. Their mother or somebody passed away due to COVID in the first really, really bad wave.
It was really bad in New York, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's it's kind of a strange thing. It doesn't seem to have an end, and now they're talking about maybe they'll put some sort of a curfew if it goes really, really bad in Amsterdam, for example. In the Netherlands, actually, we have these big cities, and then the 3-4 big cities together. That is the commercial center of the Netherlands. We call Randstad, like The Hague, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht. So that is the place where the most cases are rising these days. So they're trying to see if localized restrictions can be put in there to reduce. And the weather is not helping because the fucking summer keeps going on forever here.
Yeah, I know.
It's super annoying for me coming from India, running away from summers.
India is having like 3 million cases a day, isn't it? So it doesn't look like the heat is not good for this thing.
Look, we have like billions of people, so statistically, they're going to have a lot of stuff. Yeah,
I'd say that doesn't make news over here. It probably should.
Yeah, it's mostly local, and also I think the death rate is a bit lower in India, though.
But it's the biggest daily. They have the biggest daily numbers, don't they, of all countries? Yeah.
But the death rate is not at the same level as we had in Italy and Spain, which is surprising.
So, it is surprising, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's because India's more quote unquote younger population, because we did have that. I think this generation there is a lot of folks who are very young in India, compared to Western Europe, where the population is skewed towards older generation. So that could be one thing. But anyway, obviously, as I'm a epidemiologist expert, obviously, so I think my opinion is most important. So
absolutely,
I'm just gonna say whatever the fuck that I think. Okay, so
but the dude, it's like, why vary? From the rest of the fucking podcast.
I think we should just keep talking about COVID, and then James will be like, "Okay, I'm gonna check it out. Like, fuck this thing." I mean, people are hearing about this stuff already, like 24/7. So
I know.
It's hard to avoid,
a little.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It is. I mean, we shouldn't avoid it because it's pretty serious. I understand it, but we need our little respites away from.
Yeah.
To breathe and okay, let's try to focus on something. Anyway, so on that happy note,
just on a happy note, actually, no, I am interested actually as to, because I know some people. I mean, for me, COVID hasn't been too bad, and I'm very privileged to have that situation where I've worked remotely before COVID, and we're relatively kind of in a relatively rural area, so we don't have a lot of people, and I'm very lucky that it has been relatively strict, and I've kept working, so it has the economics haven't really affected me too much. So it's incredibly fucking lucky, basically. But I feel like some parts of this. I mean, for me, I got a dog after the lockdown, and
me too.
But honestly, that has been it's made me into the neighborhood. So many people in the neighborhood know me now, and it's like getting invites to come and that's it, anti-COVID actually in many ways, to go around to people's houses because of the dog. But it's a remarkable. I mean, I didn't get the dog just because of the lockdown, but it's definitely helped with this isolation, I think, and it's definitely helped to integrate me with the more neighbours. And I've lived here for 12 years. I've never spoken to neighbours as much as in the last 2 months. That's a bit of a nice story to me coming out of COVID. But I don't know about you guys. If you've got any kind of nice reflections on things that have happened that are good rather than.
We saw something quite similar here. We've had a dog for a few years now, and we saw it as soon as they came out and said, right, everyone's allowed one walk a day. You're allowed out for an hour.
Yeah.
We found sort of a whole load more people. Like we've got a sort of green area over the back there that we take every day. But we found a whole load more people, sort of families out. You name it, sort of people looking quite lost. Like, I never realised we had this green space around there. But then all of a sudden, all the restrictions relaxed, and when everyone was allowed out, all of a sudden it's got really quiet again. It's like, you're allowed there now. Come on, guys.
So your benefit is all the space is back.
Yeah. It's just the dog walkers again.
Man, I got the same thing. I got a really small puppy, so he needs to go out a lot. And I live in an apartment pretty close to the dunes and the beach, like 5 minutes outside. So I started going out like every 2 hours, like a clockwork. First I took like almost 2 weeks off just to stay with the dog. We stay with the puppy, and then just walking him. So I'm showing up at 5:30, 7:30, 9:30. It's like every 2 hours, I'm just walking the puppy outside
overnight as well.
Yeah. In the night as well. I first week I did in the night as well, but I think the nice part is that then he house broke like in 1 week, like nothing. So he stopped doing his shit in home in second day already, which is nice. But now he wants to go out like every 3 hours. So he's just making me. And the funny thing is, just like Ray, I've been living here for 13 years in the same apartment. And obviously, I don't speak Dutch, so that's a bit of a kind of a gap. Usually, Dutch people are much more independent, so they don't get into your noses, like Indians usually. But now, since I got a dog, now I know 13 dogs' names now already, which
you
is
never remember
crazy.
the owners' names, though.
No, I have no idea the owners' names what they are, but I know all the dogs' names now.
Yeah. You just refer to them like, oh yeah, you're Toby's dad, or
exactly.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, this is Pepper, this is Sam, this is Joy. Like, what the hell?
What's the weirdest dog's name?
I don't know. I think I heard Ifke. I don't know what that means. There are Dutch names that I
think Ifke's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Peppers, it's normal, I think. And then there are Sam and Joy. Those are pretty okay. And Zian. Wow, this is a dog naming episode.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think James, what's your dog's name?
Mine's Ruby.
Ruby, nice.
Yeah, she's a rescue dog.
Oh, nice. I think same as Ray then.
Yeah, we have a rescue dog as well. Yeah, but my dog is called EULA, as in end user licensing agreement, because it's complicated, but you just have to accept him. I'm pretty sure I've told this joke on the podcast before, but it's
nobody listens to this shit anyway, so
which is why we can afford 20 minutes of bullshit to begin with.
Exactly. I think I named my dog Baurik Wowbagger from Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, and then that was too long for people, so I just call him Bowie, and then it's like David Bowie, like. I guess, because I've never heard his music.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I thought it was called Bowie for that reason. Yeah.
No. He's Baurik Wowbagger, so short Bowie, or Bowie.
All right. Okay.
You got to choose it for something you don't mind shouting over a field, though.
Exactly. Yeah, Wowbagger. Exactly. And the weird part is every time I introduce the dog to somebody, and then especially some older generation people, they're like, oh, let's dance and something. I'm like, what are they referring to? I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a song by Bowie, that is. Yeah.
That's sort of what I figured. Apparently he's big. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Or he was. I don't know. Anyway, so I guess we covered all the topics already. We talked about pandemic. We talked about dogs. I think most important stuff. Let's get to the less important things.
Yeah.
So, James, please let us know about your Clojure journey. How did you end up in Clojure?
Wow, Clojure journey. Okay. So mine, I started off working with it I think it's about 8 years ago now, as a recent graduate. At the time, I was looking back on it. Actually, I was really fortunate to be in the right place at the right time with this one. Because I was working for an investment bank and looking for my next graduate rotation at the time on the grad program, and I bumped into Malcolm Sparks of Juxt at some internal graduate network.
Friend of the show.
Yeah. So I bumped into him at some network event, and he had an opening for a graduate who was interested in functional programming, and I'd done a little bit of Haskell at uni. And despite me not even having heard of Clojure, he decided to take a chance on me. And I guess the rest is history, really. So we both left the bank about a year after that. I think he went to form Juxt with John, and then I went to a small little Clojure startup, and I've been writing Clojure ever since, really.
Ooh, nice.
For those last 8 years, and then I moved back to. I moved back to Juxt. I say back. I didn't work for Juxt originally, but
you moved back to work with Malcolm.
But yeah,
the social circle,
very familiar ground. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So when you were at college, then, and between college and this job, when was that starting with Java or something, or what were you doing something there beforehand, or was it always a functional programming world that you were getting involved in?
No, funny you should ask. Actually, I went straight from uni into this graduate program. But for the first rotation, I was actually put into a business analyst role because they'd buggered up on the numbers essentially. and all the people, all the software developers they'd hired off of CS courses, they had too many offers out for the amount of placements they had, and so they essentially picked a few out of a hat and said, right, you're going to business analysis. Right, okay, just quite an interesting first few weeks. Not really what you expect when you come into the job. But actually, I say this, but sort of recent graduate me absolutely hated that role. It was pretty much sort of straight out of uni. Like, I want to get into some sort of serious industry code now. Here you are. And what I thought at the time was essentially sort of, you've put me into this role, which is all about sort of writing specs and talking to people. What's this about? Don't get me wrong. I really like the people I worked with, but the job really wasn't for me. But I tell you, looking back on it, I'm really sort of thankful for that, because sort of seeing that other side of it, seeing that other side, and sort of really getting to chat to business users, I think was a good start there. And then when I did get a choice in the matter, when I did manage to get back to coding,
But it's nice that you have that that experience early on. I remember when I was starting, one of my mentors, he was telling me that, okay, first you should work in customer service, and then as a QA, it used to be a role back in the day. Then you become a developer. Then you would understand, like, what the hell we're doing, and then there is a nice link between the actual product that you're building. Otherwise, I mean, I've seen some people who've been working only as a developer, working as a developer, and then they're so detached from the business reality of the situation. They always want to try out new shit or whatever, and then okay, look, for the business, I want to have boring shit that can run the stuff. Not some point, not one release somewhere. So that's a bit of a I think it's a nice experience to have that, right, in the beginning of the career already. So I've seen the other side of it.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad of it in hindsight.
Yeah. So you started with Haskell, or you learned Haskell at the university a little bit?
So really, I mean, it was the first term of programming was Haskell, and they introduced that, I think, as a little bit of a leveler, because there were probably a few people in the course that had done various bits of programming before, but they could nigh on guarantee that no one had done Haskell. So it really did level the playing field. But again, it's that mindset, right? It's that functional mindset that I think they were really looking to really teach there. They did then cover Java afterwards, but you could tell all the lecturers were sort of treating it as a kind of a second class language, to their preferred Haskell, if you like. But again, Haskell's great. I mean, I know you said that's sort of. I know we're on Clojure podcast and all, but it's one of those languages I really feel that changes the way you think about programming, like Clojure.
Yeah, certainly. I think that.
No, I don't think anyone. Sorry, go on, Vijay.
Yeah, you can say that Clojure took a lot of ideas from Haskell, right, and then just removed the types from it. Because if you see the Clojure code core functions, they're pretty much similar to Haskell Prelude. I think there are a lot of ideas. Like Haskell has been, I think, as maybe I'm misquoting, but who cares? I think the Simon Peyton Jones was like, Haskell is like the idea pool, so you can pick good ideas from there, similar to Lisp sort of way, I would say. Yeah,
I was going to say that I think, and for me, I think things like Scala, higher kind of types, and Idris and stuff like that, they're very kind of like mind-bending experiments. I remember when I was like getting into Scala, I even went as far as buying the Gödel Escher Bach book, and
nice.
I was like, I didn't read it, but I bought it. I was like excited. I was like, oh yeah, it should. I mean, it's. I think I've given it away to the charity shop now, but it was just too much. I just, for me, I think maybe it was just too big a reach, to go to those kind of like type systems that are so complicated, I'm sorry to say, but I mean, they definitely bring benefits. I can see that, but it's just like actually working with it and designing stuff with it was beyond me. I'm pretty sure once you get over the hill, then you can kind of like, feel it, and it sort of probably feels a bit more plastic than it does on the surface when you look at it from outside, Yeah, but how did you? Yeah. I mean, how did you find that? Did you find that it was, once you grokked it, you could like throw things together pretty quickly?
Oh, I don't pretend to have grokked it for a moment.
Oh right, okay.
I did. We did. I say we did probably one, maybe 2 terms of it, and then a few exercises after that.
Hey, so we are all Haskell experts here then.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay.
So let's talk about Haskell. What is wrong with Haskell? We know everything now.
Yeah.
But no, certainly. I mean, I think with Haskell, there's a good few developers that I really look up to that really that really appreciate it. So I think there's definitely something there.
Yeah.
But talking of like Haskell and like Clojure, you're doing this. Well, you tell me what the status of this project is. This Bridge project.
Yes, Bridge. So Bridge is it's a compiler that I'm working on. I'd say quite a toy compiler really, because I was looking into various things. It's mostly for my own learning, I would say. It's a kind of a halfway house between probably Clojure, Haskell, and any other number of other languages. It's based on GraalVM and Truffle, so I think that's got a good few buzzwords out the way already.
Oh yeah. I mean, you boom. Buzzword bingo for this episode is like so high. If they were making a drinking game for Defn, it would be like everyone would be absolutely pissed at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. But I wanted a non-toy project. It's actually written in Kotlin.
That's what I just noticed. It's pretty interesting. I mean, because your main project or your 8 years of experience is in Clojure.
Yes.
In dynamic typing, dynamic but strongly typed, and then you switch to Kotlin, which is a bit more strongly typed than I think static typed. You can say Kotlin.
Sure, yeah.
And then you're building a statically typed Lisp in Kotlin. So why?
You just said it was for fun. Don't ask why. That's
it's a side project. You don't really need to have a justification for a side project.
No, I'm curious, like you. Yeah.
So I mean, partly it was to learn Kotlin because I've not done Kotlin before. And I was a little bit conscious that I have really in industry I have really only seriously worked in Clojure projects.
Yeah.
So it was just a little bit of an insurance policy there, if you like, to learn another language.
So if you want to become an Android developer, you could do.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. But so I wanted to learn how compilers work, like how they're implemented, that kind of thing. Wanted to learn how type systems work. Actually, probably in truth, I've spent way more time reading and researching than I have writing Bridge in the end. I've been looking at a lot of different languages and how they approach various things, sort of why they make the decisions they make.
But isn't that the classic? Isn't that the classic hammock time? So you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, if nothing else, it's been quite fruitful for that. And you really do get an appreciation for the level of sort of thought and consideration that needs to go into writing a language. And Clojure especially, I think, makes a lot of good decisions, right? I mean, that's why we're here writing Clojure. I guess I'm also interested in kind of in a kind of spectrum of solutions, right? So without we've already got a little bit political, but without getting too political, it all seems quite debate seems quite polarized at the moment. Like you've got static versus dynamic, you've got OO versus FP, right? You've got Trump versus Biden. No, I'm not going to go there. The world doesn't need any more foreign election interference. So I'm not going.
I'm not sure what is the UK equivalent of it, whatever that is. So
I think we're deciding
Boris
for
Johnson
the next few years,
versus anyone else. Yeah.
Yeah, we're deciding until 2024 or whatever until our next one. We've got a while. But yeah, joking aside, like as with most things, there's a lot of middle ground to explore, and hence Bridge, right? Hence the name Bridge.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing because I haven't seen. Well, I dabbled a bit in Haskell, and also I wrote a reasonable amount of Scala, got paid for it. So I was looking for, I want this metaprogramming Clojure level Lispy type thing, but possibly a bit more static typing as well, because I've tasted that as well, like, what compiler can do in Haskell and Scala. I don't want the whole shebang, that they bring in, but there are like certain class of things that become very easy when I feel more comfortable, writing that code in Haskell or Scala. So I did look for is there any statically typed Lisp? Of course, there is a typed closure, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then Racket had their own version of typed Racket to introduce types gradual typing. And then there was a small language done by, I think, somebody from Latin America, probably Argentina, I'm not sure, or Venezuela, called Lux, Lux. I think he also gave a talk during one of the closure cons or something. So that's ML but Lisp, essentially that kind of thing. So it is all the union types and everything, ADTs, and but somehow the syntax didn't click with me.
Right.
Introducing this types into Lisp they always look a bit strange because maybe we're used to closure too much.
Yes, yeah. And you feel sort of closure is very simple in that respect, isn't it? It's got very, very little in the way of syntax. And when you run types on top, you naturally have to introduce quite a lot of these kind of mechanics.
Yes, there is additional syntax. So what is your approach in Bridge then? How are you thinking to introduce the types? Like what type of type system it is going to have, or it has already?
So I'm kind of looking between the two, right? Because I quite like I'm really interested in the sort of the flexibility and ease of development of closure.
Yeah.
Right? Again, I suspect it's one of the reasons we're here doing it. But I'm also interested in what static guarantees are out there, as long as they can be a help rather than a hindrance. Like that's one of the big things you hear about from, I say quotes, dynamic typing people about statically typed languages, is that it gets in your way, like Java. You don't want to write all that out and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But there's a world of difference between those like static type systems and what's available, like what can be implemented. So what am I looking for? I guess so. It's got probably the closest thing I could find to the way closures maps work. So what's called polymorphic records and variants.
Yeah.
So they provide you the flexibility of dynamic maps with the sort of the addition and removal of keys. Quite like we used to in Clojure, really. It's not too dissimilar to spec in that respect.
Okay.
In terms of saying, right, I'm expecting this parameter to have these keys, and that kind of thing. And you can infer a lot of that now.
Yeah.
There was a PhD thesis came out probably a few years back now called Algebraic Subtyping, which dealt quite a lot with those kind of things. How to do type inferencing when you've not got as much to go on from the user, when you've got to infer, when the type system's got to infer a lot more.
Yeah.
And then you got variants, which are the dual to that. So they're your sum types or your union types. So they're the ones that are useful for checking that you've dealt with all of the cases.
Okay.
So I'm looking into that. Certainly is a bit of an area of research.
Okay. So the types, they're not like a gradual types or something. They're carried along with the object themselves in Kotlin.
It's fully statically typed. So I've not gone for gradual typing. It's not really an area I've looked into, to be honest. But I felt that it gets a lot of benefits from being 100% typed. Gradual typing introduces a fair bit of complexity at the borders.
Yeah,
isn't that like also why you are able to target Graal VM? Because then you can, if you one of the issues, like why did Michael Borkent write the small closure interpreter? It was because, we just can't do eval. We can't. We have to remove a whole class of these things. So I think like an interesting question to you, whether you took any inspiration from the small closure interpreter that runs on on Graal VM versus what you're trying to achieve, because it feels like that approach that Mikhail has taken is sort of it's still closure essentially, but it could lead the way to, if you were doing your kind of thing, to static typing as well. So I was wondering if you felt there was any crossover there between SCI and what you were doing.
So I would say with Graal, they've got implementations for like JS and Ruby as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be statically typed to go on Graal, and Graal does quite a lot, really, with dealing with dynamic languages, and dealing with them when they can be unpredictable, and change types of various variables and that kind of thing. And it does a lot of optimizations under the hood for how to deal with that efficiently. With SCI, admittedly, I've not looked in a huge amount into the details of how it works on Graal, but you certainly get a fair bit. You certainly get a fair bit for free with Graal, which is one of the reasons I was looking at it. So you talk about the native image side there, which what makes SCI really quick to start up. I mean, they've also got quite a lot in the way of tooling as well. So you can implement a fair bit, and it gets you a debugger, it gets you profiling, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And did you think about the metaprogramming with types? Closure type metaprogramming in Bridge. How is it going to work?
Sorry, not really. No, in short.
Okay.
Not really. No.
Yeah.
So
we always have the hard-hitting questions on Defn.
So I mean, I've been looking into macros and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So the macros you can't quite do in the same way.
Yes.
Because at least the way I've done it in Bridge. So Bridge doesn't have heterogeneous collections in the same way that in the same way that Clojure does.
Yeah.
See what he said there. He's like, okay.
But that's the thing, right? Because in I'm not sure in Haskell, in Scala there is a library called HList. Like you can have a heterogeneous list.
Yeah, that's right.
Still typed. That. But that is because this is something that fascinates me. Like bringing this kind of ideas into Lisp with types is challenging because fundamentally they're I mean, in my mind at least, they're incompatible.
But isn't it just a container that you just have a sum of? Anyway,
no, because
how have you done it?
The way that I've done that is a container that you just have a sum of.
Yeah.
In short, so the forms as a data structure is a sum type.
Okay.
And then the type checking doesn't happen until it type checks that you return it a form, right? Your macros like a function that returns a form. That takes a function, returns a form.
Yeah.
But then it type checks it after that. So after you've done the macro expansion, that kind of thing is then when the main type checker kicks in and makes sure that what you've macro expanded to is a valid type.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
So
it is still in experimental phase, or is it like a 0.0.1 that means we can use it already?
Oh, crikey, no, it's very much experimental. To be honest, it's still got a fair bit that I'd like to do with it. There's loads to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, I've not really touched on because I've been looking to things like sort of side effect tracking as well, and structured concurrency and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Again, more buzzwords for you. There you go.
By the way, just as a small thing before we get into monads, please.
Oh, sure.
The side effect tracking. Funnily enough, and we're going to come on to Crux in a minute, but I was doing some, and this is like as a user of Crux, actually, part of my usage of Crux. I wanted to we in our work we wanted to use Crux to do some things, and one of the things that we have in our blockchain for testing, at least, it's not always true for the real thing, but in the testing side we have some atoms, and so we in the real world we have some atoms. Yeah, we do that. The atoms are a thing, but in our testing world, I've used a watcher on that atom. So it's a really nice way, actually, of kind of looking at the effect of the updates of the atoms and the previous and the next, kind of like before and after type things. And this I know about this stuff and I've played around with it, but this is the first time in the last few weeks that I've kind of like really used it in production code, in test code, but it is like code that we're going to use, and everyone's like, "Whoa, shit, that's really nice." That's a nice use of that tech because it's not seen very often. So I wonder if that's related to the sort of thing you're talking about in terms of side effects or like tracking these things.
There's quite a few of those in Clojure, isn't there? Really, I sort of remember sort of. Earlier on, when Clojure came out, everyone's talking about sort of atoms, refs, agents, and all of that.
The whole STM.
Use very little of that now.
Yeah,
very little. The pattern that's gone away, and everyone sort of sticks to their atoms, and that's about that, really.
I think agents, and then refs, and then atoms, and then now pretty much everybody just uses only atoms. I haven't seen any code with refs or agents at all. I mean, agents used to be something that did like similar to actors, but not really. So you could get something done.
The problem with those things is that you end up hitting kind of all kind of edge cases and corner cases that just don't work very well, basically.
Yeah.
You know, you end up getting locked out, basically. You know, it's like, shit, we don't want that. You know, with atoms, you can't be fucked. You know, just to get the first fucked in there. The podcast.
Hey, you also said. Well, it's not the first one, I mean,
isn't it? Oh, sorry.
we had 7 already. I mean, we're so how do you call that? Like, we're so blind to the fucks now. Like, exactly, immune to it. We don't even notice that anymore. Anyway, but the coming back to I think we talked about Crux, and so maybe it's a good idea to introduce to the people what Crux is. Like me, who
we didn't actually say that you're one of the core developers, aren't you, James, on Crux?
Yes, yeah. I look after the day-to-day development of Crux.
Yeah. So you can give us the crux of Crux.
Funny enough, yeah. So Crux, it's an open source immutable graph database. In short, is the tagline. But it's bitemporal, so it allows for all of those sort of time travel updates and time travel queries. And you can now query it with both Datalog and SQL. So recently added SQL support to that. And essentially, it's an unbundled database, so a database inside out, if you like. And it's based on sort of all the industry titans like sort of Kafka, JDBC, RocksDB for the underlying storage. Mm-hmm. So we very much benefit from their scalability and their availability. Like there's been decades of work put into those projects. So we're very much basing ourselves on them.
Yeah. So maybe you can you explain what you mean by bitemporal? Like, what does it mean?
It means he buys temporal. You know, it's like the consumer society, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
No, so bitemporal, so literally 2 times. And the 2 times we have are what we call valid time or business time, and transaction time or system time is often called. They've got so many different names.
That's 4 so far.
2 names for each of 2 concepts, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what are the two concepts, though? You know, I mean, so go on, yeah.
So we call them valid time and transaction time.
Right.
But every paper you read on it will have a different 2 names. Every database that you come across will call themselves something different. And
I guess bitemporal sounds better than 2-timey.
2-timing sounds like sketchy, doesn't it? It's exactly. I've got a 2-timing database. It's like, oh, okay.
If there is a paper about all this stuff, like, oh, it's a 2-timer database. Like, okay, that's sketchy.
But the main thing this adds you, so you got the transaction time, which is the one which is the one that's always moving forward. This is the one that gets automatically added to any transaction you put in. Yeah. And you know that the transaction time is always increasing.
That's the wall clock time, isn't it?
The wall clock for the system.
Yeah.
But the valid time is one that the user chooses. So it's at that point I can explicitly make corrections in the past, or even put data into the future as well. So if I want to schedule data to become true at a certain point in the future, I can do that using valid time.
Okay.
And I kind of think of the combination very much as thinking about corrections. So whether you think about corrections or not, because if I'm looking for audit, for example, if I want to go back in time and say what did we know at this particular date, I can go back in valid time, and what that does is that then says what do we now know to be true about that time, right? So I do see corrections in that case. Yeah. If I go back in transaction time, that's without corrections. So what did we know then? Why did we make that trade? Why did we accept that contract? That kind of thing. What data did we know at the time, regardless of what was corrected later?
Yeah. So this applies to the entire graph, or because you said it's a graph database, so does that mean it's a graph database in the traditional sense, like you have nodes and edges, and then the whole thing has these two times, or is it individual nodes?
So it is yeah, you can think about it as a graph kind of evolving through time, if you like. So at each different point in time, you take a snapshot at that point. And I guess you can kind of think of it as without wanting to steal a common phrase in Clojure. It's like a graph as a value. At that point, we take a snapshot of the graph, and then that's what we show at that point in time. So in Crux, it's documents rather than nodes and edges specifically. But it behaves in the same way. So your document is kind of parallel to your node at that point. And then the edges are done by values within that document. So if I have a key value in that document, and the value happens to be an ID of another document, that behaves as an implicit edge for us.
Oh, so that's an automatic one. It's not like you need to. Okay. Because long time ago I was using MongoDB before MongoDB became a reasonable database. We had to build a similar kind of thing, like kind of a graph on top of MongoDB, and then we had our own keys pointing to other document IDs. So I was wondering how this works in Crux. So any value pointing to the ID of another thing automatically becomes an edge for that node. Is that okay? And how did you implement SQL on top of this? Because I'm familiar with at least two graph databases, Neo4j and SAP HANA. That's enterprise crap. So they have this graph in memory, column store, everything together. But they don't provide SQL as a normal SQL anymore, because you can use either Cypher queries or GraphScript. That's the thing that they have. So how does SQL work on this kind of model?
So in terms of the modeling with the Crux SQL module, we get the user to specify their relations. So the relation is a query over the graph, and that then ends up with a relation or a table, as you'd have in SQL. And then when you pass SQL to it, you pass the SQL you write is in terms of those relations that you defined. So like, I might define a data log query that says here's all the users in the system. Maybe like find user where user has a user ID. That kind of thing. That then gives us something akin to a table. And I might then write things like, let's say, forum software, let's say comments. Here's a table of all the comments in the system. And here's a query for how to get them.
Okay.
The SQL is then interpreted by a library, Apache Calcite. Which gives us one hell of a lot of SQL parsing for free.
Yes.
So we're certainly not in the business of writing a full SQL parser. But then what then happens is that then breaks it down into an AST for us. And we can then combine the queries for the relation, queries for each of the relations, in fact, if they're joined, with the query AST, and that then essentially translates into one big data log query.
So you're translating it back to data log and then applying that onto. That's nice.
Isn't this the nice thing about like the fundamental architecture of Juxt essentially is that it's
Crux.
schemaless, so that Crux. Did I say Juxt?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, we do it all the
time. Yeah, well, I'm at 2 glasses in, so the architecture of Crux, which is essentially schemaless, because that gives you the power to essentially define not only schema on read, but actually type of schema that you want to produce as well.
Yes,
that you want to support.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we can see that being extended to other query languages as well. So we're looking at how to support that for a similar type of pattern for defining GraphQL schemas. And then exposing a GraphQL API in a similar kind of way.
Okay.
I mean, this is really nice, I think. Yeah. Go on, sorry.
Just another question about the SQL stuff, though. So,
you've picked the wrong guy for this, by the way. You want John back for this.
we'll get everybody from Crux. I mean, because
bring him in. Get him online.
I'll give him a quick call.
Because the databases are fairly interesting for me. I keep following some interesting tech that is happening in the other outside Clojure as well. So the SQL interface that you have, that means it also exposes these 2 times the bitemporalness to the SQL level as well, that I can query for where valid time is this or something like that.
So unfortunately, we don't fully expose the bitemporality to SQL, at least not yet. So I mean, there was quite a lot introduced in SQL, whichever standard that was, 2011.
2011, yeah.
I think it was 2011, wasn't it? With all the bitemporal functionality, which I don't think Calcite yet supports.
Okay.
So we've not gone for that as yet. So what
there
we
aren't
do
many
is
major databases that do it. I think
no.
DB2 supports
does.
it, and I think maybe it's Oracle with some extensions or some shit. But you know, it's not that common. I don't think SQL Server supports it, for example. You know, so even the big guys, and I don't know. I mean, I don't think that Maria SQL supports it, for example.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
because there is a. I'm sure you might have heard this one. There is a database thingy called Materialized. It's based on similar kind of ideas, but the thing is, it has SQL queries, but the SQL query can stream the latest ones because the underlying storage is changing, right? Continuously. In the case of Crux, the graph is evolving, but I make a query and then I'm getting a snapshot of the data. But if I have to get a new information, then I have to query again. But the materialized guys, they push the data, or not push, but actually they're continuously updating the back the storage table or view, essentially materialized view. So this is a pretty interesting thing for analytics, for example. You can get like streamed results. So I was curious, what plans do you have in that direction to take SQL being the one of the primary ones?
So I mean, we've obviously got Datalog as the kind of the primary language, right? That's the language that query engines is written in. I mean, we have done a little bit of unbundling in that area as well recently. So we could start to look at things like having multiple languages based on top of, essentially just as guests of Crux. So of which SQL might just be one, Datalog might just be another, GraphQL might be another, that kind of thing. We're in terms of the bitemporality that we're exposing. So Crux at the moment really only deals with point-in-time queries. So when you take out that snapshot, you take out a snapshot at a valid time and at a transaction time. So that's all we expose, even to the data log at the moment. But we're one of the things we are looking to do, and part of our ongoing research, is looking to academia to find out sort of what bitemporality does make possible. And things like advances in indexing and querying bitemporal data as well. The indexes we've got at the moment are very much suited towards this one point in time query. We've done quite a lot of work in optimizing them, so to answer those queries. But I think we probably need a bit more in the way of indices in order to answer kind of the. And I guess the kind of things you might be looking for there, like time range queries, like. Which we do for one entity. So you can say, give me the value of this entity over time. But that's obviously not as powerful as being able to do a full Datalog query over different times.
But if you get an entity and it has a reference, quote unquote reference to or an edge to some other entity, when you get when you query it at a point in time, that might not exist, right? The other one, the one it is pointing to. So you can't actually traverse in that way, or is it possible?
So if we don't provide any integrity constraints about sort of like foreign key constraints or anything like that. If you've got the data in a document, it happens to match, we'll join it for you.
Oh, okay. Nice.
But we don't. It's sort of merely a case of you throw a document in. Like throw whatever documents you got in, and then query the results.
Nice. So
don't you also have this? Just a quickie. Don't you also have this like ability to respond to index building?
You mean, sorry?
So, you can have clients that build the indexes and they can watch the logs. It's not quite like the constantly evolving materialized view, but there is some sort of event system inside of Crux, isn't there?
Yes, yeah. It's a lot of the events are sort of largely internal. Although we do expose one, which is the transaction event. So you could listen to all the transactions that are coming through the system and build up your own indices or whatever it may be, to suit those kind of queries. I've not seen anyone use it like that as yet, but I'm certainly interested in it.
No, but I think it's interesting to, when, like, if you're doing like event streaming, then you do want to do that. You want to be able to listen to all the events in Kafka, in Jux, Crux, Kafka, in Crux, and then we have a use case, for example, at the moment in our organization, where we want to listen to database changes, and then essentially for certain types of changes, we want to be able to send them out to something like AppSync or Firebase to kind of like synchronize with a whole bunch of mobile clients, which is not exactly the same kind of thing that VJ is talking about, but this kind of idea of event streaming, rather than sort of query streaming, is kind of still supported by your tech, I think. At least it better be. We'll talk afterwards if it isn't, okay?
Got it.
Otherwise, you're going to open an issue for that one on GitHub. Like, fix this thing for me, because I thought it is there already.
Yeah, exactly.
So make it happen.
I've sold it already.
Exactly. So, James, you're talking about it's like database unbundled, right? So there is storage engine, there is obviously query engine, and there is probably the transaction manager, something that is supposed to write all this stuff. So where do you store all this data? Where does it end up actually?
Yeah, good question. So we split it into three main parts. So we call it as I say, we're diving a bit into implementation details of Crux here now, but
yeah, of course.
We split it into three main parts. So the transaction log, what we call the transaction log, and the document store, which are our two golden stores. So they're the ones that really need to get backed up and kept.
Yeah.
And then finally, on each node, we keep a set of query indices, and those in theory are throwaway. That's not in theory. In practice as well, they're throwaway. So that they can be rebuilt from the transaction log and from the document store. So that those query indices are really stored in the format that the query engine needs. So they're very much so the documents broken down, shredded into the indices that then mean that we can run the queries faster. On the reason for the split between the transaction log and the document store is mainly for eviction. So we're allowed to evict documents irretrievably from Crux.
Yeah,
it's one of the things that particularly came in after the GDPR regs a few years ago. And California's equivalent as well. I've forgotten the name
Privacy Act. Yeah,
that's the one. That's the one. So what we do is we put the events themselves, what we call the transaction events, go into the transaction log, but they don't contain any data. Right? They don't contain any data of the document itself.
Yeah.
So that can remain completely immutable. And even if an eviction comes through, it's just another entry on that transaction log. And then it's the document store, which is essentially it's pretty much sort of a content addressable store. So we'll hash each of the documents as they come in, and then store them in there.
Okay, but if I have an eviction, let's say T1, and then imagine that T3 is in the future, like T1, T2, T3, etc. So at T1 I store a document, and then at T3 I evict the document. I delete it. So the transaction log will still have capital T1, capital T2, capital T3 for transactions at time T1, T2, T3, but the document will be completely removed. So if I ask for the document at T1, I'll get a quote unquote null, like nothing.
Yeah, a tombstone, we call it. Yeah.
Okay. So you get the okay. Yeah. So it's so where is Kafka
everyone
coming
calls
in the
it a
picture
tombstone,
here?
by the way, so it's okay.
Yeah. but but there are remains of stuff in under Tombstone. So,
but there are
here
still
everything is gone
with that stuff. Yes.
But where is Kafka coming into the picture here? Like, how do you use Kafka in the whole in the design?
So Kafka is one of the options that we have for the transaction log.
Okay.
So in the transaction log, it can be Kafka, it can be JDBC, and we're also looking into certain other transaction logs as well. Essentially, anything that can provide us with a sequential list of transactions, we can use as a transaction log.
Okay, and for the document storage, is it your own format storing to the disk?
So we store the documents in NIPI format at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So just
like a compression,
free of serialization. But that they can go in a JDBC table as well. We can put those in S3 if you can use S3. And we've actually even had a community contribution recently. So thanks Henrik for this one. For Crux's Azure's blob storage.
Okay.
So starting to expand out there as well.
Nice. So essentially, you can well, as you said, it's completely unbundled, so to speak. So the storage engine can be anything, either S3 or Azure Blob Storage, and the transaction log can be Kafka or something else, or a database, or a SQL database. Okay. That's interesting.
The other thing that I thought was sorry, I was going to say the thing that got me sort of. I mean, I'm interested in Crux because it's like I know it's not an open source version of Datomic because that would be crazy, but it's kind of like it's inspired by Datomic, isn't it? So
very
in
much
the sense that you kind of like it's a database enclosure, so you're gonna have some kind of relationship there in terms of inspirations. But one of the things that was really was kind of really nice recently that you guys did that I kind of missed was this whole idea of like this notion of putting transaction data that you could speculate about rather than just kind of like data that was in the past or this bitemporality in the past. You actually had a third time in some respects being the in-memory data that you have, making it sort of a what-if type of database.
Yes, speculative transactions. I think it's quite similar to your I think Datomic calls it with as well for that. But yeah, I mean, just to talk briefly about Datomic, I think we'd be foolish not to look at it, and especially given sort of so many people within Clojure are so familiar with how it works. I think we'd be foolish not to sort of make the make it seem familiar, if you like. But at the same time, we've obviously sort of the open source side, the unbundled, and the
architecture is obviously very different.
Yeah.
So what is this speculation transaction stuff?
Right. So that allows you to put transactions within the database without persisting them. So it allows you to do things like what if queries. So what if our sales data over the next couple of months looks like this? What does that then look like for our yearly? I don't know. I'm making up a use case here. What does that look like for our annual numbers? Or that kind of thing. But the idea is that you then get your own personal copy of all of the data. It takes I guess you can kind of think of it as forking at that point. It forks the database at that point.
Basically, you can do all the transactions in your own memory and never commit them to data. It's like it's good for testing, isn't it, as well? So you can kind of like you can sort of say, okay, this is the real database. Like it could be 0, and now I'm going to put all these transactions in memory, and then I'm going to just throw them all away. But it feels it's all committed, so it's all kind of visible in terms of its own, in terms of all the queries that are made on different threads inside of this own memory space. It all works.
But then it's node specific then, right? It's
it's
not going to flow across the nodes then. That makes sense. So in the normal SQL world, then I would create a temp table and join them and then figure out how it's going to be, I guess.
Yeah, which is
it's
really
probably
crappy,
closer to a transaction that you're not going to commit, I would guess, in SQL.
Yeah.
The temp tables are used in a similar kind of
you
way,
can say commit off and then try it and then don't commit the stuff. So you can set, but that is session level thing, I think, in JDBC normal.
So you're really
databases.
thinking in relational database worlds these days, VJ? I mean, you're not.
No, I mean, I always think in relational
checking.
database, but the main thing is that because there are so many people who know relational database so much, SQL so much, it's kind of stupid not to tap or give tools to them. You know, like Datalog is probably known by 4 people, I guess. You know, pretty much, relatively speaking, and the amount of people who know SQL is massive.
Yeah,
and it's like reach. You know, it's like JavaScript reaches sort of thing. So SQL has that reach, and it's not going to go away. And
it's the tooling as well, right?
Exactly.
So much
it's the tooling, everything around it. So that's why you see SQL being applied to everything, like streaming SQL, KSQL, and Spark as well. Like Spark supposed to be like big data querying engine or a processing engine, and most of the projects that I've seen so far is just use Spark SQL. That's it. Why bother? So they spend so much time in improving SQL performance rather than working on inner workings of because SQL query planner and all that stuff, because that makes Spark accessible to everybody immediately, not people who know Scala or RDDs and data frames and shit and whatnot. So I think it makes sense that you provide a SQL interface. It makes it super easy to introduce to people who don't need to learn a new language again.
So, do you think it's kind of like, I'm interested in this about whether or not like it invites the question about why bother,
Why bother as in why bother learning data?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, why bother not just using SQL Server or Oracle or like Aurora DB or whatever? Why?
No.
If you're into SQL, then what I take your point that we're just having a bit of a light moment here.
Yeah.
I like the idea of putting SQL on top of things, but I'm just to play devil's advocate a little bit. That once you start doing that, you're kind of inviting that question, which is, well, I might as well just use a proper SQL database.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, the underlying data and then the type of the usage of the data has changed a lot, right? Like for example, the idea of what if scenario. I still want to do that, but I don't want to learn a new language for this shit. Like I want to do this by using SQL, and then the data is coming every second for me, so there is streaming stuff invented. But can I use the same interface to tap into that thing? I think that would be my opinion. I don't know. What do you think, James? I mean,
no, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think we obviously are sort of presenting quite a difference in terms of the data that you put in. We're certainly not supporting sort of inserts or updates as yet in SQL land. But yeah, I mean, it's familiarity, right? It's if it's one fewer thing I have to learn about a database to get started, or if it's, I mean, we may also be talking about sort of different groups of people as well. So you may have certain people within a company, within a team, that are way more happy to get their hands dirty with things like Datalog or GraphQL or whatever have you. But then you may well also get people within the company, let's go sort of data scientists, data analysts, that kind of thing, who are so familiar with that just want to stick with it, and that's fine, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah. No, I think the idea of like using SQL as putting emphasis on the queue makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think Gray, I understand your point, because I think that is more developer point of view, right? I mean, if I'm a developer and I'm building an application, because I can learn SQL, or I can write Datalog, that's fine by me.
I always like to take the developer viewpoint, VJ, against you. One of the management elites.
Obviously, obviously, my opinion is highly valued because because I'm in the management now. I think the other side of it is that exposing the data to people directly, rather than having this okay, I'm going to build a CRUD app on top of this shit, and then that makes that is a kind of a different. In that case, I completely agree with you. There is no point. You can just stick to SQL, whatever that is implementation detail. But once we start exposing the data to quote unquote non-developers, then they have less amount of interest in learning data log. Or whatever.
No, it increases the reach of Crux or any other sort of like like esoteric database. Let's say.
So, totally. And also it can plug into everything, right? I can now plug into Tableau. I can plug into whatever the tooling. Crystal, speak SQL. You're done. Or Power BI or whatever. That makes it awesome, actually. Anyway, so coming back to Crux again. So it's not a normal client server sort of JDBC thing, right? Because if it is similar to Datomic, that means there is every application is joining, or how does that work then? If I'm building an application using Crux.
So with Crux, in a similar kind of way, we actually bring down all of the data onto each node. The node keeps its copy of the query indices. So while they do share the JDBC service for the golden store side of things, the node then is responsible for pulling those down and indexing those in a way that it can then service queries, and the node can be embedded. So the node can be embedded within an application. It's just a JVM application in that way, in the same way. I mean, we do have like an HTTP server that you can then, if you do want to deploy Crux separately from the application, scale it differently, that kind of thing. Can use the HTTP server there. But fundamentally for a query, it goes to its own local indices in order to satisfy those queries. So for that, we've got we mainly use KV stores, like fast KV stores for that. Facebook's RocksDB or LMDB are the main two. So one of the reasons that we're currently trying to we currently have it local is that the query algorithm we use is quite chatty. It's quite back and forth to service these graph queries. So looking at adding network hops to each of those conversations does add a fair bit. I mean, that said, we do have a Redis spike in the pipeline as well at the moment. So interested to see how that goes. Interested to see what the performance numbers look like on that one.
Nice. And how does the writing work then? Because how is that coordinated?
So the writing is coordinated through the transaction log. So your Kafka. And we do that via a single partition topic on Kafka. So each of the nodes, when it gets a transaction submitted, submits it to Kafka. And then essentially, if you want to read that write, you then wait for that transaction to come all the way around the system, and get indexed into your local Crux node.
Okay, but if you use single, I mean, I can understand. I'm guessing you use single partition because you want to have the ordering guarantee. But isn't that then against idiomatic Kafka, because you really want to partition it so you can scale it too well, right? And the Kafka itself, because Kafka scales by partitioning.
Yes, yeah. I mean, even with single partition, Kafka still gets you a fair way. So that's going to serve for a decent amount of use cases. But we'd have to look in Crux. I mean, we've certainly considered how we could use multiple partitions within Kafka. And I think one of the ways would be to look at introducing a little bit more schema on top of what we currently have. And relying then on the end user to say, right, I can guarantee that these two transactions don't overlap. So here's you can put them on different. We'll hash them. We'll give you like an event hash or whatever it may be. Which then goes onto different partitions.
Yeah, so you can have hash partitions, because I think that scaling up Kafka without partitions is going to be painful, right? And also you need to have because if every node so every node connects to the partition to read as well. The read happens via Kafka as well.
So we've got an indexing process which happens on your local Crux node. And that's the thing that reads down from Kafka and indexes it into our query indices. And then the queries themselves only look at those local query indices in the main. Only look at those local query indices and the document store, in fact.
Okay. And how is the performance, like, by the way? I mean, what kind of benchmarks or something? Because I know Datomic famously doesn't allow people to benchmark stuff. So
yes, I mean, obviously I can't give you a comparison.
Yeah, that's completely understood.
But we do have some public benchmarks, or at least a public benchmark suite, which we test a few different data sets. So we do have those running every night, and what I will say is that it holds up. It holds up. We run WhatDiv, which is an RDF benchmark, which we then translate into Crux documents and Crux and Datalog queries.
Okay.
And we've also started recently benchmarking TPCH, just a standard SQL benchmark.
Okay.
Nice. As well as a few other smaller benchmarks.
Yeah.
So we do have those running on a regular basis.
Okay.
So is your goal there to make sure that you don't go off the charts with the next release on one of these benchmarks?
Yeah. It's
you can go off the charts upwards. It's okay. I guess that's okay. You'll permit that.
Yeah. I was about to say, on the optimistic side of that, it's improvements so that we can, in the release notes, we can say, it's 40% faster. This time round, and we've got some numbers to back that up. So that's mainly
really good.
But regressions as well.
Yeah. So Crux is completely written in Clojure, right? That's what I'm guessing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we got some Java on the more sort of performance heavy areas. So, and once you get down into the sort of depths of the query engine, it gets quite gnarly.
There's a few,
particularly around sort of memory management and that kind of thing.
There are a few transients and things like that around.
Yes, yeah, fair few of those. Few of those. But yeah, especially once we get down into the query engine, we do have to do quite a lot of memory management. We've got quite a lot of same way as Clojure does generally. We've got quite a lot of short-lived objects. So need to try and cut down on those as much as we can.
Okay. So, is this the project that pushed you to build Bridge?
No, I mean Bridge I've been working on and off for must be a good few years now.
Oh, okay.
So it's been a sort of, I say, a hobby project for a long time.
Okay.
But yeah, so actually before I joined Crux, I did start to sort of investigate like what's it like to implement something like Datomic, and then Crux came along and was open source, and it's like, okay, now I can go and have a look. But no, I mean, I think because there were one or two blogs written about the implementation of Datomic, which had been around a while back. Speculated implementations of Datomic.
Yeah, and also DataScript, for example.
And DataScript
from Nikita.
Well.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very, I think to me it seems like a very fertile space, because people do want. I mean, people do. I think Rich was right actually that this whole idea of like having all this nice stuff in Clojure and Eden and all these things, and then having to sort of talk to some messy back end that didn't know what was going on and wasn't immutable, then it's kind of like tedious at the best and kind of like disappointing at the worst, But maybe it's not the worst to be disappointed, but but definitely, it's like, why can't we have nice things? Whereas now it seems like there's a cornucopia of nice things, which is really good, because this space is kind of like blossoming a little bit, I feel,
Yes, yeah, it certainly feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think what you guys have done as well is really interesting because you've made it unbundled, you've made it open, and like you say, like the SQL stuff, you didn't. I mean, I know you stitched it together in the end, but someone else puts those PRs together, and someone, I'm pretty sure there are other community contributions around these things that you've benefited from,
Yeah.
What's the story on that actually? I mean, are you getting some like? Is there a fair number of like community pickup and community like involvement in the code or in the add-ons?
Yeah, community's certainly growing on that front. It's been good to see. Like, we've seen a little bit of a spike recently, which is quite nice. In the sort of number of questions we're getting through, and inevitably the number of issues that are getting raised. That kind of thing. That's going to happen as well, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting quite a little bit of that. We've not seen an awful lot into the core, which I kind of understand. There's quite a lot to get sort of up to speed on there. but especially around the edges. So we're getting a few modules coming in now. It's particularly sort of data storage. It's like I like Crux, but I'd really like it to store its data here.
Yeah,
I mean the protocols on the edge are quite simple, really, for what they do. Like, I mean, document store, for example, the protocol for that one is submit docs and fetch docs. So it's pretty it's plenty accessible to be able to do that. Transaction log has to be a little bit more complicated, but it's definitely feasible.
Okay.
And wasn't Malcolm talking about something to do with timelines recently as well, to do with schemas?
Yes. So he's talking about the separation of time, code, data. And I've got those in the wrong order. Time, data, form, and code.
Right.
So apologies, Malcolm, if he's listening to this. I'm probably going to do a terrible explanation of this. But
let's hope your bonus doesn't depend on this, James.
Exactly.
But it's the separation. I mean, we talk in the closure industry constantly about decomplecting, a word that I'd never heard before. I'm not even sure it existed before closure. But we talk constantly about decomplecting things, and the theory there is that if we can split those four apart, that will lead to us being able to work with simpler systems for longer. So keep systems simpler for longer. And Crux very much, I think, is the embodiment of that. The splitting of those four.
So what are the four again? Time and
time,
code,
data, form, and code.
Okay, what is form?
So form is structure, essentially. We've got a thing at Juxt for 4-letter names, so it had to be a 4-letter name. In fact,
structure.
Structure. I think the fact that it's code makes it particularly
code.
Makes it particularly appealing to us. Form is the separation of form and code and form and data. Is really to say that we don't know form and structure up front. So there's quite a lot of solutions out there which rely on you knowing how your data is structured up front. Like you think of like a relational table or whatever. Yeah, sure, you can make migrations. But fundamentally, we don't know the structure until we've tried to use it, and until we've got sort of new styles of query come in. Like, I never realized that I wanted to use this data in this way. And so if we can decouple form from the underlying data, we can then make systems that are more flexible.
But I think my question, and I think that we're going back to the original point, was about having like this notion of schema itself being on the timeline. So you can, I think one of the, like, it's interesting. I mean, I work in a kind of like in this blockchain kind of like domain, and for us, like things like the contract evolution or the sort of evolution of the data form, those kind of things are, they're definitely interesting. And obviously this whole thing with Rich, with his dependencies mapping and all these kind of things, that things change over time and they should grow, and if they grow, it's okay.
Particularly the accretion with Rich, isn't it?
Yeah, if they grow, it's okay. But if they don't grow, if they change what they return or what they expect, then it's a break. So I think with schemas, you want to also have that kind of schemas essentially define a contract, don't they? So you want to see whether that contract is like how that contract evolves over time, essentially.
But isn't this similar to, maybe I'm not understanding it properly? Isn't it similar to something like Avro, because you have this data and then schema, and then that can evolve over the period?
Yeah, but I think it's not a first-class citizen in Avro. I think the problem with Avro is that Avro is a data structure that it's nice in the sense that these schemas travel with the data. So the version that this data is of is version 2 or version 3. So the interpreter on the other end can understand that. But Avro itself doesn't lend itself to a global view of what that schema looks like. Maybe you can. I'm pretty sure like the Confluent guys can build one for you, but but it doesn't come out of the box with Avro. Whereas I think the idea with Crux is that you can see the evolution of a schema on your database in a separate timeline to the evolution of the data.
But aren't they codependent? I mean, like the schema cannot live. Well, schema is meaningless without the data, right? Or
well, obviously not. Come on, mate, keep up.
Yeah. So the schemas we have, it very much lives on top of the data.
Yeah.
So you got data in itself is in as raw a format as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
And then applying schema to that, applying structure to that after when you need it.
Okay. So actually, with them, you can put data into a database which doesn't conform to any existing schema.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It may conform to a future schema, or it may not. So I think that separation is kind of like confusing to the layman like you at the beginning.
Yes,
but
totally.
It's like
that's the
business person,
So it's obviously not for me because I'm at SQL. So
I should say I don't think we've really fully incorporated form into Crux as yet. I don't think we've really got that. I'm sure there's some iteration to come on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it takes
form follows function though. I think that's the way to think about it.
Fuck. Okay, there is function now. Okay.
No, but that's just
form
that's
follows
a cultural
function, which is in the code.
That's a cultural reference, VJ.
Yeah.
Form follows function.
Because it already took significant amount of brain power that I've used completely now to understand, the change from relational database to streaming shit for me. I still don't understand streaming, so that's a good thing. So I can just live in my cozy SQL world.
I always think of it as the equivalent of it's the equivalent of having a drink of water versus pissing.
I'm intrigued to see how you get out of this one.
But so what is streaming? Is pissing?
Well, ingestion is the drinking, and streaming is the pissing. Yeah.
But you do stream water into your mouth. You don't just
No, that's ingestion. Come on. Yeah.
No, but you do stream that. I mean, it's not. There is a pipe there.
Well, I guess you could stream the piss and piss the piss at the same time.
I don't know what you guys do in Belgium, man. I have no idea.
You'll forgive me for not using this analogy in our documentation, won't you?
No, man. I mean, this is. But anyway, I mean, the thing is that it's for me it feels like the complexity is raising by decoupling things too much. Like at some point there are too many moving parts, and when we introduce these abstract concepts that are being decoupled, that feels even weirder. Okay, I have data, if I understand you correctly, Jim. So I have the data that is in the data storage, but I don't have the schema for it yet. So because my interaction with the data is via schema, at least that's what I would think. So that for me that kind of contract breaks there, because I cannot retrieve the data because I don't know the schema.
But it's a schema of this database. It's a schema of this database. I mean, you have to.
That's bullshit. What the fuck is schema-less database? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it is, because in the sense that you can MongoDB, mate. Remember that good old days
does. It does have schema. That is okay. Just because it's NoSQL doesn't mean it's
no.
But
the schema is only the document that you insert. So in that sense, JSON acts as the schema.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a schema.
Eden acts as a schema.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a bullshit thing, because like JSON and Eden don't change, whereas your expectations of the data day to day, they do change.
Yeah.
So you want fields of you want a certain number of fields in this document. You want a certain a certain type of these fields in a document on day one, but you want something else on day two. That's the kind of classic schema, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's where they have like Eden as a schema. So that's true everywhere. That's a base, but then they want, if you want to like enforce a spec type schema on top of that, or a data log schema, which is, I think a data log is always schema on read, isn't it? So
So that's why if we come back to the SQL that we talked about earlier, where you define the relation separately. So you've already got all of your documents in Crux. We then define the schema as a query on top of that.
Okay.
So you're going to have access to that relation when you write your SQL. So your SQL then is based on top of that structure.
Yeah. So
But
it's more like moving the constraints.
Yeah, but that was not
Yeah,
guaranteed on insert. That's the important point.
Yeah.
Okay. At least at that point in time. So the idea about this idea of evoluting schema, according to what I understand from Malcolm's talk anyway, is that you can kind of say, okay, well, what can I expect from these queries at a particular point in time?
Okay. It's like looking into the future.
Well, actually the past, isn't it?
Either.
No, it's like
either. Okay. But mostly the past because schema 1 existed, then schema 2, then schema 3, and schema 4. So, you want to see the difference and, track that timeline.
Okay. Well, I mean, that went right through above my head. So obviously, I guess, I think my schema is not that separated, I guess. So anyway, so.
Is my schema your next database? Is it?
Well, I mean, I'm planning to retire in 2025. So, I don't care after that what happens in computing industry. Like, fuck it,
Ouch.
We have enough complexity already. My brain cannot take it anymore. So I'm giving it up. Like, okay, fuck it, I'm done. Because the world is moving towards all sorts of weird directions that I can't, keep in my mind, or at least my brain cannot tolerate.
Yeah, that is one of the things about tech, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, every day there is something new that we need to catch up. But at least Clojure has been one of those reasonably rock solid foundation stable thing for long enough for me to understand. So it took almost 10 years, but yeah, I think I finally have some idea of what Clojure is, at least.
Well, one of these days, if you can explain Spec 2 to me in the next podcast, it'll be very interesting.
Why are you asking me? You're the schema expert. So you should explain that shit. I just have one last question about Crux, by the way, because it has so many pluggable components, right? I mean, because these things can be pluggable. So isn't the deployment, gets a bit scary when you're configuring and then maintaining and then all this stuff?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's one of the downsides, if you like, of the unbundling, is that it can seem as if there's like so many choices to make.
Yeah.
But so I think one of the things we're working on is both sort of making the boundaries clearer, and it's one of the things we've been working on a lot in the last 6 months or so. Is making those boundaries clearer, making sure that with the sort of the components that we have are clearly defined, the responsibilities are clearly defined.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it is, as well as, about sort of writing up guidance about what to consider when making those decisions. So very much. I mean, it does. I mean, I guess you could say it's a similar way to Clojure in a way, and that Clojure's kind of got a little bit of a reputation for a lot of wiring up.
That's true.
We got a question on Crux the other day about sort of what would you now recommend for how to make a web app in Crux? Web app in Clojure. Wow. Okay. Where do you begin? I think if you got 10 different Clojure devs on that one, you get 10 different answers.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit. Yeah, you're right. There is a sort of a paralysis of choice there, if you like. That we need to help people through. I mean, that said, we are working quite a lot on sort of deployment and operations as well. So things like we released what we call Crux Builder a couple of months back. And that's the thing for you to build your own Crux artifacts. So if you did want sort of Kafka on one, S3 on the other, and then rocks as indices, you can then go and make yourself a Docker image for that, or an Uber jar for that, whatever you need. So we are writing up a lot more about that.
Yeah, because the tooling can help here a lot, right? I mean, the way, especially if you want to put this into the deployment, whatever that people use, like Ansible-driven things or whatever. It's much easier to have some sort of a tooling available.
But the thing is, I mean, you're going to have people with different constraints, right? I mean, you're going to go into some business and go, right, we're based on Kafka, and that's an instant no. Or we can only provision sort of JDBC databases easily. Or we're working with a certain type of blockchain or whatever it may be. Like, you're going to get these constraints. So we've chosen best to be open there.
Yeah. But are you like Kafka is more kind of necessary thing for Crux right now, or is it something like Are you looking into implementing AMQP related stuff so you can use RabbitMQ or something else?
So we've also got, we can also use JDBC tables for that transaction log side of things. So you can use JDBC across the board for the transaction log and doc store.
Yeah.
I dare say we could add support for other queuing libraries as well, other queuing services as well.
Okay.
Or we could get some community contributions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, because because AMQP is more or less like a protocol level thing, right? So once if you enable that one, then probably you can talk to RabbitMQ and maybe Zero as well, I guess.
Does AMQP guarantee ordering? That's the only thing that's the only thing that you need, isn't it, James?
That's the big thing.
Ordering.
Yeah. I think it does because RabbitMQ.
I was a bit confused by that. So
because I only know RabbitMQ side of it, maybe. That's an obviously people who are listening to this one, you're way smarter than at least two of us. So so please let us know if you can build stuff with the AMQP, and then that could be a nice community contribution. Then suddenly it opens up more possibilities for Crux. Nice. So just one last question. I said a last question, but it's not about Crux anymore. So I still have one more question though. So I've been writing Clojure for 8 years, 9 years almost. So is it Emacs or some other shit?
I've got to be careful with this one, haven't I?
No, not necessarily.
For me, it's Spacemacs. So.
Nah, there you go. See, I think you're a quality person, so I can imagine you're using Spacemacs and. There you go, right? I mean, even smarter people use Spacemacs, obviously. So
why did I
even
bother talking to this guy? You find stuff out on this show, that you didn't know.
So this is like one of those memes, like James is not my friend anymore. At the beginning of the show, he was our friend, but not anymore.
Yeah.
That's nice. So you build the entire Crux using Spacemacs.
Oh, I can't say I've built the entirety of Crux, that's for sure.
But you're developing using Spacemacs. So
yes,
I think yeah. I mean, you know how marketing works, right? I mean, there is a small star somewhere, and then there is condition supply.
Yeah, right down at the bottom there.
Exactly.
May or may not be true.
Exactly.
Not actual gameplay.
Yeah, exactly.
Sequences may be shortened.
Transactions may be lost.
Yeah. So
we're not wrong there. It's okay.
Phew.
So now you know that entire Crux is built using Spacemacs. So yeah, that's
we'll say that. We'll say
that. On that bombshell. So
on that death planet.
Yes, on
the
that
Death
one.
Star of Spacemacs.
Computing. Yes. So yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground. Is there any other thing that we need to mention? Obviously, Crux is open source, so it is available, and people can download, install, use it for whatever the thing. If you are into code, then you can support by writing code. Writing extensions, writing the add-ons, whatever the different things that James discussed about. So please go and check out. And obviously, you guys offer commercial support, right? For Crux. Yeah. So Jux will provide commercial support. Yeah. So there is a solid Clojure company behind Crux. So that means the ins and outs of it, obviously. And you've been doing Clojure for long enough. I think within Juxt it's like how do you say, like 50 years of Clojure experience.
Oh, crikey.
Or more? Probably more. Yeah.
It's got to be more, I reckon.
Yeah.
Let's say 100 with a star at the bottom.
May or may not be true.
May or may not be true.
That should be this podcast. Actually, we were talking about doing some 2020 merch. We should say something like Defn Clojure podcast star may or may not be true.
No, Defn, the best Clojure podcast.
Oh yeah.
May or may not be true.
May not be true.
So that'll be our new T-shirt.
We used to call ourselves the best vegetarian Clojure podcast. I think that's probably still true. Yeah, it's probably still true. But yeah, that's really good. Yeah,
nice.
Inspirational.
Thanks, James. I think it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and then getting deeper into Crux. So I think people who are listening to it, you can go and check Crux, github.com/crux. Yeah. And there is Crux channel in, I think, all the usual places where you suspect Clojure folks are available, like Clojurians.
So we got a Crux channel on Clojurians. We've also now been invited onto the GitHub discussions beta.
Perfect.
So that's a good thing to try out as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And our official support channel is a Zulip channel, which is also available there.
Yeah,
we can put links to these in.
Yes, we do. Yeah. I'll put the links to all the stuff. So I think that's it from me. And any last words, Ray? Or last insults to your co-host?
No, I mean, to be totally honest, I've used Crux in the past few months, and I found it to be a real pleasure. And I think James and his mates are doing a great job there. So I think this whole space is it's very fertile ground, and so I think it's just excellent that that people like James. I mean, especially without being too patronizing, a young man like you, James, young man. Oh yes. Young man like you, coming up in the world, No, but it's really nice. I mean, to be delivering such great technology into the community, and because the reason I mention that is in terms of last words is because I think Rich put his hand up at a conference a year or two ago, maybe a few years ago, I don't know, saying who's used Clojure, who's been to a Clojure conference before. It's all the old crusties basically, and his idea was maybe it's not too bad if it's all old crusties, but actually it's quite nice to see. I know that Juxt is quite a young company. Actually, I know that Malcolm and John are more senior, a bit older, a bit more grey hair or whatever. But obviously they're young at heart. That's for sure. But clearly the company that you've got going is all kind of like recent graduates, in their 20s and 30s, and it's really nice to see people doing this groundbreaking work, young people in this community, and I think I'm really lucky to be a consumer of this stuff and to be talking with you guys, and hopefully kind of helping to promote it a little bit with this podcast with VJ, But James, a real gent, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and congratulations on the work you've been doing so far, and it's a great start to your career, I think.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me on as well.
Totally,
it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Awesome. So, 100 years of Clojure experience building Crux in space, Max.
So that's the new tagline. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. May or may not be true. So that's it from us for episode number 64. And wherever you are, stay safe. And I think we'll be back with another episode soon-ish again on our regular or irregular schedule that we are on. So thank you.
Thanks, James.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Defn. And the awesome vegetarian music or the track is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Wouter.
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page, and you can show your appreciation to all the hard work or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray, with me for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojurian Slack or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at Defn Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day and see you in the next episode. that's why people stopped, coming to our show. Like, this is a shitty show. I don't want to be associated with this.
Dude, people didn't stop coming. Don't tell him that, okay?